After a lot of thought, I would say that I spend my time to try to find ways for my client base to become as comfortable as possible in the event that they need long-term care in that situation, to give them as much dignity as they deserve. They deserve to have that dignity at the end of their life through a long-term care process. Some frankly don't receive that for various reasons, primarily because of financial issues. And then to, as they go through it, that they don't leave their spouse or their family in a financial bind. They don't leave them behind knowing that there's some fear about whether or not they're going to be able to continue to live comfortably through retirement. So those are the issues that we really focus on as we move through this, and you'll see that. Let me see some of the topics that I'm going to cover in this, and a lot of this now, these 6 areas come to me because of what I've done in seminars over the years. And these are typically the questions that I get asked. This is normally where I have my clients come back to me and say, can you help me with these particular areas? So we're going to cover what long-term care is. And I can see, traditionally, long-term care has been known as something where you can't do 2 of the 6 areas of daily living. You aren't able to do, let me name them off: bathing, toileting, transferring, dressing, eating, and continence. And the standard definition would be your own physician would say you're no longer able to do at least 2 of those, which means that you are currently in a long-term care event. But the one I want to focus on, and the one I would encourage you to think about, has to do with transferring. At the end of the day, all of those issues really fold into that. And transferring would be your ability to get, let's say, from a bed to a wheelchair, from a wheelchair to be able to toilet, from the wheelchair to a car seat to see your physician. That transference, which comes a lot from arm strength and the inability to be able to balance well, or leg strength, is where you're going to need to have some help. So that's where, for those that have been through this, probably, I can't see you, but I can feel you nodding your heads, and probably know this from your parents. That's where it really is driven. So what are the types of cares? We're going to focus on 3 particular areas. One is getting care at home, where most would like to have it if they could financially afford it. That's where they're most comfortable. That's what we're going to talk about probably the most. Secondly, would be an assisted living facility. And I'll talk about the different types that are available today. There's a wide variance, and associated with that would be a wide variance of cost. What's the likelihood of needing care? What can you plan for? What would you think would be the likelihood that you're going to need this as you move into your latter years of retirement? How long would it last? What's the length of the care? How can you plan for that? What are the costs associated with the place you're going to be, the length that it's going to be? How much would that cost? And how, most importantly, are you going to pay for that? And when I ask that question, it really isn't necessarily for your own care. What we mostly see as we move forward is the remaining spouse or family that's involved, and the long-term care event, because of the costs associated with it, can destroy a good income plan at retirement, or even an estate plan for wealth transfer at the end of life. So those are the 6 topics I'm going to look at. And what I'd like you to do, again, is to look at this or think about this under the umbrella of preparing for retirement. How is that going to fit for your retirement plan? And many will use this analogy all the time. In fact, I've heard Winston talk about this, that planning for retirement is almost like climbing a mountain. You have 2 sides to it. You have the ascension, and then you have the descension. And if you talk to most, when they talk about a goal of climbing a mountain, it's to get to the top. It's to be able to reach the pinnacle of that. But frequently, what is not looked at, or maybe there's not the same level of planning involved, is how to get down. How do you get down from there? And as it relates to retirement, the ascension phase is the accumulation phase. It's a saving phase that you have while you're working, which means you save as much as you possibly can to provide a base for yourself that you're going to be able to access at retirement. And then as you reach retirement, you have the distribution phase, the descension. And that in the retirement years means that you carefully plan how you're taking your money, how much you're going to need. You're going to make sure that you're going to be comfortable, that it's going to last for the remainder of your life. And then you're going to look at some of the potential expenses that are going to potentially eat away at the savings you have. So let's talk about some of those issues. Let's talk about those that can impact that descent. Just having enough money. So did you save enough in retirement? Have you made a plan that you've been able to follow that will tell you, based on how long you're likely to live, based upon how much you're going to have in taxes, what your lifestyle is, all those issues? Have you created a large enough base to get away with that? And that comes from a good financial plan. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of this presentation. But that's where, if you think about that, that's if to fail to have that plan there, you're really planning to fail in retirement, as John Wood would say. Another thing that may impact that quite a bit would be what we are in the current low interest rate market. Now, as you know, rates are starting to rise a bit, but we're still far below the median, the average that we've had historically in the rate market. So that may mean through retirement, especially, that things aren't continuing to grow the way that you'd hope they would. Healthcare costs, big issue. How is that going to impact your savings base? How much do you have to plan to spend in that particular area out of pocket? The good news is, from a medical perspective, Medicare has done a wonderful job. And as long as we can maintain that as an institution, that has helped a lot of our members, at least on that side of it. But where it's left aside, where Medicare does not cover, is for long-term care costs. And when I look at long-term care costs, again, we're going to consider three of the areas where you're going to most often look at having a long-term care event: the facilities that you're going to use and the cost associated with that. So we're going to look at the cost around an in-home care. We'll look at the costs associated with the assisted living, and then finally those for a nursing home. And then I'm going to show you something that I hope that you have pulled aside, maybe a pen and paper with you. I would like you to take down a note, because this will help you a great deal, and it's something that I use as a resource almost every day. So looking specifically at the in-home cost. Currently, as part of what the Genworth annual cost of care survey, which is the best in the business, is what we all use to determine what good solid numbers are for the current cost of care, say that currently for in-home care, you're looking at about almost $71,000 a year here in 2021. If you look at a inflation number to that at about 3%, and I would suggest that number may perhaps be a bit low, certainly as we move forward and demand becomes higher and higher for these services. If you look at that, if let's say that you're age 60 right now, and you are going to need long-term care when you're age 80 in 20 years, then at that 3% inflation, you're talking about roughly $128,100 being taken out each and every year for as long as you need that care. In 30 years, let's go back and say maybe you're 50 and at 80 you're going to use that. In 30 years, at those inflation numbers, we're looking at over $172,000. Now, I know these numbers, for those of you that have not seen them or not used to them, they may look high, they may be even a little bit scary. But I'll tell you, there are going to be ways that we can look at how to cover this in a very manageable way. I want you to know that. So let's look at the second area where you'd be spending the money, in assisted living. And before I get into this, I'm going to tell you that these numbers would include only room and board for the assisted living facilities. The additional upcharges that you have are when you need to have in-house assistance. So someone needs to help you get into your wheelchair once a day. If somebody needs to help you with your walker, get you to the meal room. If someone needs to bring meals to you because you can't get down that particular day to a lunch area, whatever those are all up charges to the costs that we're going to look at right now. So for that, room and board only. Currently, 2021, about $63,000 at the 3% inflation we looked at, a little over $113,000 per year in 20 years, about $153,000 in 30 years. And then finally, this is for a nursing home facility. Now, to put this in context, this issue is really going to come up twice. It typically does in the very beginning. So if you have someone who has fallen and let's say they break their hip and they need to have reconstructive surgery. After the reconstructive surgery, they're going to put them in a rehabilitation facility. Usually that's a nursing home, and they're going to work with physical therapy. Medicare, by the way, will pay for that up to a maximum number of days of 90 days. With that, there's some issues we'll talk about here towards the end that surround that, but that usually happens during that period of time. And because of that 90-day expense or that 90-day coverage by Medicare, most will leave before the 90 days is up. So it'd be in the beginning. On the other side, there's sometimes where someone needs the highest level of care 24 hours a day towards the end of life. And sometimes they'll enter a nursing facility so they can get that level of care. So kind of before and after. That currently we're looking at about a little over $135,000 a year for a private room, a little less for shared rooms. At that 3% in 20 years, that would be at 190, roughly 198,000, and 266,000 in 30 years. Okay, now I told you that I was going to bring you to, and please write this down if you would, write down Genworth. You can see it here below. It's spelled Genworth, cost of care. And if you search for that, it's going to pull this up for you. Okay, and what you're going to see in the cost of care, this is very, very helpful. So you should be able to see the map of the United States here. I'll tell you how to use that, along with the cost of care and in your zip code. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put in our Manhattan Beach zip code so that in what you'll see, if I put that in, that's going to take us to something that really is in the LA area. You know, that's the closest area that it's going to show. And we're going to do this on a monthly basis. So here's where these numbers came up for me. And let me explain these, not just in dollars, but in the services that are there as well. So in the in-home care, two show up here. One's for homemaker services, the other's for home health aid. The homemaker services is generally someone who is there really as physical support. So someone that can help get you from the bed to the wheelchair and maybe help bathe you. Somebody can help make meals for you. Somebody can take you to the grocery store or go on your behalf. Somebody that picks up the things that would be at that point difficult for you to do, somebody to drive for you. And we've all seen these people in the grocery stores following behind people and helping people, and that's the group that we're looking at. The home health aide is someone that is normally licensed. They're there they can help administer medication for you. They can, follow your temperature, and they are frequently in constant contact with the physician who's overseeing the process. So they wouldn't need to be there all the time. Usually a lot of times they're one and the same. They do all of these things. So if you had a home health aid person, they would help you with homemaker services as well. All right, moving down here to adult daycare. Now, this adult daycare is not unlike what we had maybe for kids when they were younger. And you would, before nursery school, you drop them off at some place for childcare during the day. This is for adult daycare when they're capable of at least getting around with a walker. They spend the time with other people their age, maybe playing games throughout the day, serve them lunch while they're there, that type of thing. It's not used very often. And of course, someone needs to be pretty high functioning in order to qualify to be part of that. And then here's the assisted living part that I talked about. Currently at $4,500 in this area. It can be, if I look at a few of those, my My significant other, she's the director for a facility in Whittier, and their average right now is a little over 5,000 for room and board, and then the add-ons for that for services. So it can be as high as 6,000 or 7,000 as well. And then the final one is a nursing home. You can see today that's about $8,000, or for a private room, roughly $9,000. One of the things, I'm not going to show it on this end, one of the things you can do if you say that at retirement we're planning to go to a different state, or we want to be by our grandchildren who are in Michigan or whatever that might be, you can go back to the map that I showed originally, just point and click, see what the local care would be, and you can compare that to what the averages are here. And that may even help you make your decision about where you want to be long run. All right. So again, Genworth cost of care, that's the important one for that. Now, if I can, wait a second, we're going to run back. Okay, I want to talk about some of the things that are going to be impacting the cost of care. I talked about those that are driving up the amount that you pay for this, and what are making it higher and higher and higher, especially beyond that 3% inflation number I talked about. Now, we do have inflation, general inflation, that's affecting all of the expenses we have. Healthcare costs may be one of the highest. The reason that's happening with this, baby boomers are retiring, and now a number of baby boomers are moving in to needing long-term care. And as that number becomes higher and higher, then the demand for this is going to be higher and higher, and the costs are going to grow as well. Also, people are living longer, and this brings up another issue that I should talk about. So there are two sides of the long-term care need. One would be for a physical need, and I talked about arm strength, leg strength, mobility, those kinds of things. The other, though, that is an increasing number is for cognitive issues, for memory issues. So that would be advanced dementia, or Alzheimer's is really, unfortunately, on the rise. And with those memory issues, those clients tend to live longer. They, life expectancy is already being increased because of technology. A number of those people, when they have those issues, tend to need that care not only 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but they need it for more years than the average carers for physical needs. Family dynamics. As we get into how you're going to pay for this, who's going to provide the care, how that's going to work. My experience is that families have been wonderful in this area, just fantastic. That, and I should add one caveat in the beginning. When this happens, it seems like the family rallies together. There are even those who are nearby and have the time and the capability of being able to provide help, and they'll do it up front and do a good job. Unfortunately, what also happens is that tends to tail off after a while, and it's just because they have their own life. I'd tell you a quick story that I had several years ago. My son was able to be on a World Series winning. They beat Japan Little League team. And it was, one of the best experiences, certainly for the kids, but I think more for the adults than it was for the kids. And we were watching a game that would have put them in the next level to be able to actually go to the World Series. And my son had pitched, and he sat down, and it was kind of over. And another pitcher was in the bullpen about to come up. And I looked behind me, and I saw his mom getting up. And I started to tease her, and I said, "You're not going to go to the restroom now. You're going to leave. You can't leave now. He's about to pitch." And she said, "No, Paul, you don't remember. I have to go home and take care of my father." And that was a very poignant moment for me, realizing that, to have to make that kind of choice and to have that type of decision for what is going to be priority is difficult. And it's not unlike the kind of decisions that, those of us that have gone through this before, that we've had to make. And finally, government programs. I won't touch on this fully yet. This may come up more towards the very end, but let me say that I mentioned that Medicare is just fantastic for health issues, medical issues surrounding, hospital, certainly surgeries, procedures that need to be done, even post-surgery when you're talking about the rehabilitation I mentioned earlier. But that cuts off at the maximum of 3 months. And after that, you're on your own. You need to take care of that. And there really aren't other government programs available to do that except for Medicaid, which of course here in California is Medi-Cal. And Medi-Cal and Medicaid were established to be there for those who are indigent. There are ways that you can qualify for that, but effectively what you need to do is not have a lot of assets and even less in income. And if you qualify, it typically is a husband and wife scenario. So the husband or the wife who's healthy and left at home may be left with a less than desirable income in order to qualify this, if you qualify. Right now, the qualification takes more than 3 years. So they're looking at those at the very beginning of 2019 who applied. And if you try to get rid of assets, spend those down, or get rid of the assets that give you the income, or in any way, when you apply, they'll look back 30 months and see what has been given away, what has left your own asset base, your own income base, and they'll what we call claw back. They'll bring that back and count that as part of your total assets and your income. So it is very, very difficult to qualify right now. And for those who have been following this, we're saturated. We're at a point where the money is just frankly running out. And so they're talking about a finite number of those who qualify. And after that, that's it. So if you've looked at this and you've heard things that are contrary to what I just said, we certainly can talk about this afterwards, and I'd be happy to talk to you about this one-on-one. I mentioned Alzheimer's on here and how that's on the rise. Currently we have 6.5 million that Americans that are age 65 or above that have it. But and this was done back a few years ago. That makes that, I'm sorry, this is for 2022, 6.5 million Americans, but that's 1 out of 9 Americans above 65 have Alzheimer's. And again, that number is rising very quickly. By mid-century, we're talking about someone in the US will develop that disease every 33 seconds. If we take a look at this, comes from the Alzheimer's Association. If we look at the length of need of long-term care services on the average for both men and for women, and then what it is for Alzheimer's, this particular survey showed an average then of about 193,000 per year for this. And for men, that would last roughly 2.5 years, so a total of 427,000. For women, sorry, ladies, higher because you outlive us. Frankly, that's where that number comes from. An average of about 3.7 years. So if you average these two together, it's about 3 years for men and women. For women, that total would be about 717,000. And then for Alzheimer's, you see the jump. So I said the average for men and women about 3 years. That goes all the way to 8 years would be the need. So at these prices, it would be a little over $1.5 million for Alzheimer's. So in terms of the likelihood of receiving this, the likelihood of having a long-term care event, what is it? What do we see right now? So it says that 7 out of 10, once you reach age 65, 7 out of 10 will need the long-term care coverage. And that if you do have it, for those that are needing the care, 20%, 1 in 5, is going to last longer than the 5 years. And a large part of that second statistic is because of what I talked about with the cognitive needs. So back to the different meanings of long-term care and the services that are available. This is where you start the conversation with your family, first with your spouse, then with your family. You're going to talk about where do you really want to be. If you look at it in that event, do I want to be at home? Can we afford to be at home? Is that where I'd like to do it? Do I want an assisted living? Do you know maybe family members who had a positive experience then, or friends or family? Perhaps that's where you want to go. We can talk about those different services. In terms of facilities, some may need to be in a nursing home. And what facilitates that? What's going to be the need that would drive you towards that nursing home? And then the emotional conversations. These aren't easy, and I realize that. And first, I should say congratulations just for taking the time to have this awareness enough that you're looking at and planning for and thinking about this as a potential event for either for yourself or your spouse or for both of you. And then once you're able to determine some of the things that are most important to you about where you'd like to be, how you feel you'd be the most comfortable, how you're going to pay for that, be certain to have those conversations with your kids. I'm telling you, they will be involved in one way or another. And typically what I see is that one of them step up and they're kind of the quarterback. They're kind of the one that drives how the needs are going to be. They make the phone calls on your behalf. They come to us and ask for our advice. So that's part of that discussion. So we've talked about just about everything else, but how do we pay for this? What's a good way to do this? And you may want to look at this and put that under the category of
Hey, Paul, let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
We forgot to mention one thing. If you do have any questions, there's a function to raise your hand, and we'll be paying attention to that. And if you can, hold the questions until the end. So sorry about that, Paul. So sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's, I know I've been talking about questions taken at the end. We've actually have some time to do that. And we have a lot of good discussion historically that happens at that point. So feel free to come with me with everything, and we'll get into these issues at the end as well. So look at it as another bill that you're going to have to pay and prepare for, and try to determine where that's going to come from, how that's going to look. And I put you back to that concept of looking at a financial plan so that you can confidently determine where the money's going to come from. Is it coming from income? Is it coming from some dormant assets that you're not using in retirement that are there for a rainy day? We can help with that process. So explaining the concept here to mostly, to your kids, you're looking at this, I said earlier, as an income issue. And therefore, as an income issue, income drives your lifestyle. And your lifestyle determines how comfortable that you're going to be in your years during retirement, and then, of course, especially at the very end. And those last few years that you are using long-term care can quite easily be the most expensive in your life, the most expensive years because of what you're putting towards the long-term care itself. So if this does outweigh, here's a good example of this. Some people, let's say, have a budget they put aside in their plan of $200,000 per year. And one day they have to make that call, and they call their financial planner and said, hey, can you take an additional 50 to 70% more out of my savings and take that from my income in order to pay for my spouse or myself's long-term care? So what would happen in that situation? What are you really looking at? So this really becomes what we've talked about is the gap in the income that you have. And it is something that's not just an academic issue. It's not a concept that we're looking at. This is very specific. And you can, based on the numbers I showed you earlier, we can plan for the event. We can plan for the timing of the event. We can plan based on what your desires are, how much it would cost on this, and we can show them what the effect would be to your overall retirement financial plan. So let's look at this as another example. And this particular example, what we're looking at is someone who had $100,000, make that for a round number. That's what they're using in income. If one of the spouses had an Alzheimer's event, over time, they're going to find that that's going to increase what their expenses are far beyond what normally is planned for. And this is where the gap comes in. This is where the gap, as you see, rises over time. And in the beginning, it won't be, this is true with almost all long-term events, not just a cognitive or Alzheimer's. It's going to be somewhat minimal in the beginning as the family is involved, as the needs are less, but over time, the needs will be greater. there'll be need for more involvement, and especially with the cognitive event, that gap may rise to the 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. So if you look at what would happen with this long-term care event, especially the cognitive event, how would you be able to sustain your income from this? You know, how are you going to make sure that income doesn't become a problem? Not necessarily for you, but the surviving spouse that's home, that's watching income and assets dwindle. Well, there's one thing you can do in terms of paying for it, and that would be self-funding. So you can look at putting those rainy day assets aside, which is not a bad way to do it, liquidating some existing investments. A lot of times we look at maybe liquidating a rental property, or there are bonds that are there, annuities, managed accounts, other assets that are available that you can sell and use towards paying this. Now, of course, the issue would be if you are using, or if you plan to use those in the future as part of the income, it's going to hurt to sell those. The other issue would be, like all assets, especially equity assets, the value of those go up and down over time. And if we run into a situation like we may very well in the real estate market, you may find that when you liquidate what you need, that the value of that has gone down and you're getting less than you really deserve for it. So self-funding would be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to use your family. And as I said, I highly suggest putting a plan together that determines where you want to be and how you'd like to have care, providing the greatest level of comfort for you. And again, dignity. Dignity is a big issue for that. And then based on that, look at what type of support that you need, what kind of care you'd have. And you can put, if available, if they're local to you, your children may be able to help with that. Your grandchildren may be able to help with that. And I can help you with a good plan to put that together. The other may be you're looking at or considering government funding. I would ask you to shy away a bit from that based on what I said earlier, and I can show you some of the things that have changed over time and what that means. I certainly would not rely on that. Absolutely not rely on that. Remember, what's available to pay for that has been set aside for those that are indigent, not those that are not. The final one is to use for funding, and we have a number of different methods for that, but you can either pay for what we call a traditional long-term care policy, which means that you put money in that over time, and when and if the time comes that you wanted to pull money from that, you're going to be able to pull out much more than you put into it, and that would help pay for those costs. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to put it in a life insurance-based product, and that does a couple things for you. What it does is to immediately give you much more than you would put into that policy that would be available for the long-term care needs. It also said if you don't need those and later in retirement you need to pull that money back, cash is available to you in large sums to be able to use to maybe offset what you have in income, to supplement your income plan. And then finally, if you don't use it, and this is probably the best way to look at it, because you don't know that you're not going to use long-term care until, frankly, until you pass away. So if you did not use that and you pass without needing the care and needing and having the expense, then there's a large number in terms of death benefit that would pass to your kids or your spouse, however you would set that up, and that would go to them tax-free. Again, after this, we can, Winston will help you that, I can help you with that. Whomever you want to talk to about that would be certainly able to point you in the right direction, at least. And then finally, I'll say in terms of next steps, so the first thing to do is the talk. And the talk begins with, if you're looking at a couple with husband and wife, going through, again, where you want to be, what does that look like? What would that mean in that situation? Please don't be one of those. I've seen an awful lot of husbands say to their wife, they point to their wife and they say, well, there's my financial plan right there. And we kind of giggle about that, but that's just not the case. And unfortunately, in years past, and a lot of that has to do with society, how we looked at caring for the elderly. We did it within our families. in a lot of cases, those who were caring for somebody with a long-term care event would predecease the person they're helping. Let me say that again. Those that were caring for someone with a long-term care event would predecease the person they're helping. And that number had been on the rise, and it's just not something that can be sustained over time. Those of you that have gone through that, I know are nodding your heads on that as well. Make sure you meet with your financial professional to talk about what you want, what it probably would cost, how that would look. Highly encourage you to look at, yeah, Winston comes back on, especially somebody with that experience and capability. Highly would suggest that you put together a financial plan to help with that. Look at all your options, look through and talk about what the family can do. How long would that normally last? You don't want to put undue pressure on them to help, but there's where you're starting. What else is available to you from a government perspective? And then what do you need to draw down on your own savings in order to do that? And put your plan together. I'll say it one more time. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And then at the end, when it's where you want it and you have a good idea how it's going to look, it's a tough subject, but reach out to your kids. They're going to be grateful. My parents had an idea of what they wanted to do, or I guess I should say more often what they didn't want to do. They said, whatever you do, don't put us in a nursing home. That was the the only mandate. But tell them about what you want to do and make sure they understand, how you'd plan to pay for it and how you'd plan to do it. And that'll do wonders for this when the time comes. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Winston. But before I'm going to do that, I'd like to mention Whitney Bullock. And Whitney is part of our team, part of us that support Winston, that are on his team as an advisor. And she heads up our financial planning area. And she's helped so many of our members put things together and get a very good handle on their retirement. As it relates to not just this issue, but a number of things that make them feel very comfortable, much more comfortable about heading into retirement. So because you've attended this, we normally have, I'm sure you've seen financial plans out there, and many charge, between 5,000 and 10,000. A going rate is typically between 500 and 1,000. And we normally charge 300. If you have attended this and you reach out to one of us via email or call us by Friday, August the 26th, you'll receive a complimentary financial plan to help you get started with this. So with that, thank you for your time. I appreciate that. Winston, I'm going to turn this over to you now. Winston, I think you're on mute.
I am on mute. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, you're welcome.
What I was saying, thank you for this presentation. This was a lot of great information, a lot of information members ask about. So I'm glad we were able to share it today. Again, I want to tell everybody, if you do have questions, please use the raise your hand function. Paul, we do have one in the queue for you.
Great.
So yeah, let's start with the question. Rosie Chen, if we can unmute her. Let's see.
Hi, thank you so much, Paul, for your great presentation. I guess I have two questions.
Sure.
The first one is, did I hear right at the beginning, you said that it was a 30 months look back or something like that for any government assistance? So yes. I always thought, I guess Medicaid is 5 years. So are you talking about different kind of government assistance? There's 30 days?
So that is what they call the clawback period. And that is for being able to qualify for Medicaid. And it was a strategy, Rosie, for years and years. And in fact, that's probably why we just, really are running out and don't have much money left. That as a long-term care event happened to a family, the family would normally give the assets away to their kids, give the house away, put it in their name, other assets they may have, put in their name. And the, Medi-Cal and Medicaid nationally said, well, that's just not fair. That's not who this is for. And it's not an effective way to do it. So what we're going to do is to go out and look at the last 30 days. I'm sorry, 30 days, the last 30 months, and determine what's been done, and anything that is been given away during that period, they'll add in towards the asset qualification and for the income qualification. Yeah, there's some out there that they're talking about, Rose, you may have heard this, they're talking about making it 5 years.
Right, I've always heard.
Yeah, and in fact, that's probably next. That's probably the very next thing to have happen. But I'll tell you, the way it's looking right now, you know, because they don't have much money, they also don't have a lot of infrastructure. They don't have a lot of bodies helping them going through the qualification process. That's why it takes 3 years at the very least to find out if you qualify or not. Those people are having a hard time doing the review of assets and income. And what I'll say, though, kind of like the IRS, if you've given it away, they're going to find it. And what's happening are when people pass away and they go to settle the estate and they look at the amount of expense that the person needing care had incurred, if they find that, you know, there was a house that had been, you know, passed, or other assets that had been passed, they'll put a due bill either on the estate or directly to the kids who now own the house or the asset. And that's happening frequently. I think that's going to be something that they use more and more, because it isn't used for, it's supposed to be for those who can't afford the long-term care.
I understand. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And
I think you said you had 2 questions. Did I answer both?
no, I have a second one.
Okay, no, please go ahead.
The second one is I've talked to long-term care insurance, of course, with friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
One of the comments that I've heard, and it's a valid one, is that if we are in our 50s right now and we don't need this until 20, 30 years, what if you pay into it and then by 20 to 30 years, by the time we need it, that company is not there anymore? How do we, I guess this is maybe we have to go for a good insurance company, but how do we ensure that whoever we buy into when we need it is actually going to be there to help us?
Well, that's a very, very good question. Of course, you're kind of looking at the same thing with all assets. Anything you save, anything you put aside, you know, those are based on investments that are made with organizations. Unless you have an awful lot of cash under your mattress, you know, that kind of the same things. But the insurance companies that we select, we have a stringent vetting system where we're picking. I mean, we have the New York Lifes of the world, you know, that I know before I looked at something right now, and I know that they're going to take on risk of paying an estate of $40 million without blinking an eye. I mean, they have assets there to make sure that they're going to be able to pay for this for a long, long period of time. And what they do, I'll just say this, all of the insurance companies, no matter who you select, are under the same requirement for liquidity, in that at the very least, every dollar that they promise to pay out in the way of any of their policies, their life insurance policies, or, you know, property and casualty, auto, whatever it might be, they have to have $1 set aside for every dollar they promise to pay out. And in most cases, they have $2, and there's an awful lot of those out there that have $3 or more. And that is far above, many, many, many times above what most other organizations need to have in terms of liquidity, put it aside. And if you think about what they do, I mean, they pull in money and they hold that for a long period of time. And if anyone has the dollars to pay for these needs, it would be insurance companies. So that's a good question, but probably the safest institutions that we work with.
Great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good question.
That was a great question. Do we have any other questions? You can use the raise your hand function. It should be at the bottom of the screen. All right, we do have one more. Rosie, you have another question?
May I ask another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're on a roll, Rosie. Keep going.
Thank you. So when is the best time to buy long-term care insurance? And
Great
I've also
question.
heard that there are kind that are like for a couple. So if one is in the 50s and one is in the 60s, should you buy a joint one? So only one needs it and the other one I guess it's only for one person, right?
It is not. There are those that are available. That's actually the best question you've asked, by the way. So I may ask you to ask another one when we're done, because that one was great. But so the starting point, and I should have brought that up actually, the best starting point is somewhere between, say, 40 and 55. And the reason I say that is the younger you are, as you know, with insurance, the more leverage you receive, the more benefit you're going to have for this, because the less risk it is to the insurance company that you're going to need it, because you're probably not going to need it until your 80s. So when you put money into this, and you can pay for this, by the way, all up front, you can pay it over time, however it works best for your own financial plan. But in doing so, the younger the better there. But normally, Rosie, we see people between 50 and 60 do this. And I would say probably the sweet spot is between 50 and 55. And that brings the most financial benefit for you on this. Therefore, the least amount of money that you need to apply towards this. And you're old enough at that point that you probably have, saved a few dollars to be able to apply towards this as well. And it's a great time to think about, this is when people think most about retirement planning, is during that age as well. And I think you had a second kind of part to that. Did I answer everything you were looking for?
Well, can I just clarify? I've heard that 59 is a good age because the price goes up at 60. So
yes.
Is there another bracket at 55?
Well, I'll tell you, every year.
Yeah.
So you said it would go up at age 60. So at 49, it goes up at 50, 50 at 51, and so forth. So each year that that you wait, there's an increase in that. And then, I know she had the other part to it. You're asking about joint policies.
Yes, thank you.
There have been a lot of changes in long-term care support and policies for this. A lot of very positive things. I think one of the most positive is that you can do it for husband and wife. They'll blend the ages, and you'll find that it's less money to have it for husband and wife together than it would be for husband separate and wife separate. And what happens is that you pool together funds, and that you're each, when you need it, drawing upon that pool of funds. And so one can use it, the other can use it, you both can use it, however it might be set up. That's a very, very good question.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
And what I could add to that, another positive event that's happened, they used to have these policies set up only for reimbursement. So what it meant is, let's say I said that quarterback who was, let's say you had a daughter who was involved in this, and she was helping. At the end of the month, she would gather together all the expenses that were there applied to the long-term care event, send those to the insurance company, and they would reimburse for that amount that had been paid out of pocket. Now they have indemnity policies, which are wonderful. And what that means is you can draw down on that whenever you need and for whatever purpose that you need. The only thing, of course, that you need to do is to have your own physician say, yes, they can't do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, and as such, need to go on claim, as we call it, and need the long-term care, and are able to start drawing down upon that. But what that, not only does that provide, the ease and convenience, but I've seen quite a few situations where maybe, as an example, a granddaughter gets out of college, can't find a job, loves grandma, would really love to help her, especially, in her latter years, does that. Grandma says, well, I can pull down off of this policy and pay her, even though she's not a licensed person, and she can help me and be there all the way through. And it's a wonderful situation for all involved.
Yep.
So yeah, that's another piece of that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie.
Yeah, that was another great question, Rosie.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any other questions? This is the last call. Rosie, you have one more? Well, all right, I will end off with this. Again, thank you for joining us today. Paul, this was an amazing presentation. Everybody look out for emails. I think Paul's gonna be doing it again soon if you missed anything. But the main thing here is when you start this journey, the best way to start, or even to see where you're at in your journey, is with the financial plan. So we really look forward to hearing from you, being able to provide at least that complimentary service to help you out. And it was a pleasure. And Paul, if you have anything to say to everybody, go ahead.
Now, the only thing I can again say and reiterate, besides doing the financial plan, how that's important, not just for you, but for us. It gives us a really great idea what you can and cannot do. It really lets us know what's the best option, the best advice that we can give you. But the other thing I would say one more time, congratulations on taking the first step towards, I know, a very difficult subject. And once we put this together, we'll have something that's very definitive for your kids that you can share with them.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, good weekend.